welcome everyone to this session on outcomes management from FSP's perspective. I'm Amelia Greenberg, Deputy Director of SPTF. I am delighted to welcome you today to this session and very grateful to our three excellent speakers who will be sharing their expertise with you today. So we're joined by Scott Graham of Finca, Cornay Nagel of 4G Capital, and Caitlin Scott of Friendship Bridge. Before we get into it, I want to say a few things. I'm going to be very strict about our timing today so that we make sure to leave time for question and answer. So please do get your questions ready. You may submit them at any time in the Q&A function or in the chat box. We will keep an eye on that. We are going to do questions at the end, but if we get a lot, we'll stop a little early to make sure to leave time for all your questions. And if not a lot come in, we'll go a little longer on the interview. So it's up to you. If you want your question answered, submit now. And also just a fair warning to everyone that I'll be strict on time. So a brief bio on our speakers. Caitlin is Chief Strategy Officer at Friendship Bridge, overseeing strategy, social performance management, including evaluation and technology for her organization. She's been with Friendship Bridge for 12 years and has had a lot of different functions over that time. Cornay is the Chief Data Officer for 4G Capital. He has more than 20 years experience in credit risk and mobile lending. And he also serves as an artificial intelligence advisor for various European and African governments. And Scott is Vice President for Research and Data Science at Finca. Scott supports Finca's investment strategy through customer research and rigorous testing of Finca's social impact. So welcome to all of you. And since we unfortunately aren't there in person, we thought we would start with a quick poll to get a sense of who's in the room here with us today. So if you can please launch our first poll, we'll just ask you which stakeholder group you're from. So those of you in the audience, once the poll's up, please answer the question and we'll get a sense of who's in the room, the virtual room with us today. This is my first time doing polls at e-MFP, so if there's glitches, I apologize. Okay, there it is. You should see it on your screen. What is your stakeholder group? Please just take a few seconds to let us know who you are. And I'm not seeing how many people have voted, but host, friend, if you can close the poll and show us the results when it seems as if a lot of people have voted, please do that. So we'll see the results in just 1 second. Okay, so one financial service provider here this morning, several investors or donors, some consultants, a network member. Okay, so this is pretty good diversity. Other person, I hope you chat with us so we know who you are too. Okay, great. The next slide here is just the quick one that some of you have seen, but for those of you who have not, we want to provide this quick key definition discussion before we launch into outcomes to make sure we're all aligned on our understanding of what I mean by outcomes. So this graphic shows the different levels of data that you can be tracking about what your organization is doing, starting with the inputs that you use, and then what your activities are, and then your outputs. In financial services, your outputs are going to be things like how many loans you make and how many savings accounts you offer. And then outcomes are change that is occurring in the lives of your clients that is plausibly associated with the intervention of the financial service provider. And that's different from impact, which attempts to measure causality. So it's looking specifically not only at what caused change, but if many different factors caused a certain change, it tries to attribute what % of that change was attributable to a specific intervention. And so that's a lot more rigorous and complex of a process to determine impact. And for that reason, it can be costly, and it can be fraught with methodology complications that sometimes, especially with human behavior, make it very difficult actually to get an accurate picture of causality. But we think for understanding what's happening in clients' lives, outcomes is sufficient if you're looking at the changes that are plausibly at least associated with what you do. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We have one more poll for you. If we can launch that now, please go ahead, host. Oh, we're jumping ahead all the way to the takeaways. Please put the slides back. Outcomes data collection. So we want to know how many of you, now that we know what outcomes are either doing this directly yourself. We have one FSP in the group, it seems, or have you worked with organizations that are doing this? And if so, is it something they do at least annually, meaning regularly? Or is it more of a one-off activity that has happened, but it doesn't happen as often as every year? Or you don't do outcomes data collection, you or your partners, or this is not applicable to you. So again, this is just getting us a sense of who's in the room, how familiar you guys are already with outcomes data collection. Okay, I think we're about to see the results of this poll. Oh, okay, great. Look at that. So a lot of people are already working on outcomes. So we will have a lot of confidence. You're going to ask tough questions, good questions. That's great to see the expertise in the room. Thank you. All right, we can close out this poll. All right, so now we're getting to the fun part of our discussion, which is hearing from our speakers. You can go back to slide 3, please. We go back up one slide to the data on each organization. Yes, so just a quick overview. I'm going to do it in order to save time for the discussion. Finca International was founded in 1984 and is a family of companies now. Finca Impact Finance is one of them, and it has subsidiaries that operate in 20 countries in many continents, collectively millions of clients, and they're offering loans, savings, and insurance. Friendship Bridge was founded in 1998. It's operating in Guatemala, has 23,700 clients, and you can see from this chart, they do not only loans, but also the plus side of microfinance, non-financial services with a particular focus on education and health. And then 4G Capital, founded in 2013, operating in Kenya and Uganda with 200,000 clients, and doing a variety of different lending. So let's turn off the presentation now and just see all of our speakers' lovely faces a little bit bigger. If you can close the PowerPoint for now, please. We're going to get to the interviews, and Cornay, we'll start with you. We'll just go in order. I'm going to ask each of you, please describe succinctly what type of client outcomes data your organization collects today.
Okay, so at 4G Capital, we have a touch tech approach to collecting data from our customers. That just means that we give a lot of value to both the qualitative as well as the quantitative side of the data. That helps us to get a holistic view of the needs and the situations of each of our customers. Now, with qualitative surveys and things like that, we would use agents or call centers, as well as low tech means like SMSs or USSD, to be able to communicate with our customers and also to help identify early signs of distress and also macroeconomic sensitivities that could impact our clients. That's happening. Then from a quantitative perspective, this is directly from the historical performance data, looking at demographic data, things that we typically would record, as well as the business affordability, and using that in machine learning to be able to measure and quantify the willingness and the ability for our customers to be able to repay the loan without experiencing additional stress. So we want to make sure that we give them something that would help them grow their business rather than put additional stress on top of them.
Okay, just one quick follow-up question before we go to Scott. When you said you'd call clients and you often use call centers or agents, can you give us a sense of how many, I assume it's on a sample basis, about how many people you're reaching, how frequently?
So we would typically, correctly, like you said, it would be a sample, but also some triggers that would activate that based on their conditions, whether we can see some form of deterioration in their repayments or frequency. So, and also from a collections perspective as well, we would do those. It depends. So, but from a sampling perspective, we would typically do about 500 a week or so. And it really depends on the volumes and capacity.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. So we'll pause hearing from you for a second and move over to Scott. Scott, this is a huge work within Finca. You guys have talked to us about this for years, and it may be hard to summarize, but can you tell us what Finca does to monitor outcomes for clients and how your program works?
Sure. So I would just, I guess, start off by saying how important it is that everything we measure is grounded in our theory of change, which I think in Finca's case roughly follows the logical framework of the slide that you just presented. But in a simpler version, we start with indicators that tell us who our customers are. I think it's very similar to what Corné was just mentioning, which is really important in the context of financial inclusion, because we start with the premise that financial exclusion itself is a negative situation that impairs people's ability to prosper. So right from the get-go, it's very important for us to have data that tells us, whether or not the people we're serving are in fact financially excluded, and that we're not just out there, kind of offering one more service among many. And so assessing the needs and the circumstances of our customers is a big part of our mission monitoring. And whether that means looking at their poverty status, their gender, how they earn their livelihoods, or their financial health. So all of these are markers of economic and social vulnerability that are very important for us to understand, either at a population level or when we have the chance to do it on, say, a panel basis to track customers over time. One other element of the generic framework that has a huge influence on the kinds of any kind of outcome we might observe is the uptake and the usage of the services among our target population. Usage is one of the most important mediators of impact. So we put a lot of effort in understanding how the usage of our services is evolving over time, what alternatives people have, and where we have the means to really dig into the enablers and the barriers to usage. And that means understanding the use cases and the customer experience, which are really a very useful bridge between the social mission and the business strategy. And it's also why we put a lot of effort into measuring things like customer satisfaction and brand health, which are really framed in terms of the business, but which ultimately reveal, what value are people getting out of our products and what tangible benefits are driving usage as well as impact.
Okay, great. And then the same follow-up question to you, very practically, what does this look like? Is it an annual survey? Is it a stratified sample? Is it a 10-minute questionnaire? Is it an hour-long questionnaire? How do you get these data? There are actually a ton of data sources, I know, but you can summarize
Sure.
mechanisms.
Yeah, I think for the purposes of this discussion, we'll just focus on one instrument, which is our global mission monitor. So that's a one standardized, fairly standardized survey that we apply across the entire network of subsidiaries. It's a 5 to 10 minute phone survey in most cases that we apply on a sample basis. So I think last year we surveyed about 20,000 customers across the entire customer base. It tends to be somewhere between 6 and maybe 1,200 customers in each country, depending on how we're stratifying the sample to cover things like to be able to segregate between borrowers and savers and mobile wallet users, et cetera. So it really depends on
well as business development. And so through several participatory processes, we've identified a set of 13 indicators that we want to track for outcomes evaluation over time with our clients. And in order to do that, and they fall in those 3 different outcomes areas. In order to do that, we use a variety of instruments and methodologies. First, we use the Poverty Probability Index, the PPI, which we have collected from our clients since 2013. Every time our clients get a disbursement from us, from their loan, we collect that data on them. So it's from basically an annual basis that we collect from all of our clients, meaning it's a census. We complement that with a couple of additional indicators that we collect from all of our clients. But then we also have another methodology or instrument that we use that looks at more aspects of our clients' lives around those topics like empowerment, self-esteem, participation in decision-making, which of the topics that we are providing in education, they're applying in their daily lives, what health services they're accessing. And that instrument is an individual interview survey that we collect from a randomly selected sample that we do a follow-up on every 2 years. And so we basically collect from one baseline 1 year and then follow up 2 years later. And we collect from a different baseline the following year and follow up 2 years later so that we have a rolling set of information that comes in that we can use to be continuously improving how we provide our services, what kinds of products and services our clients need, to be continually adapting how we do those things. We do a variety of qualitative type of methodologies as well. We have a committee of elected clients who represent our clients on a broad basis. And we take advantage of that mechanism to do a lot of focus groups to really provide us more in-depth or subtle or more precision around, the quantitative results that we're getting, to understand them more effectively or to decide how to react to them and formulate better actions. And then finally, we take advantage of, we've worked now 2 times with 60 decibels, the evolution of lean data, as an external evaluation mechanism. They call our clients with a random sample, and they collect a survey that we co-developed that is actually very similar to the surveys that we collect. So it's a way for us to kind of triangulate what we collect internally to see if we're getting similar results, as well as with the power of that being that they have a benchmark that we can compare to when we look at our data.
Okay, great. There's a lot there, and I'm thinking of 20 questions, but I'm going to stay with you, Caitlin, and I'm going to ask the follow-up that I'll then go back down the line and ask everyone, which is, I know that you have been working on this a long time and that what you've done has evolved over time. And I wonder if you can synthesize for this group what you would say has changed, the lessons that you've learned and what's different now from how you used to do outcomes data, and just explain sort of the main learnings that you've had over the years, what wasn't working as well that's now reflected in your current system of outcomes data.
Great, yeah, so as I mentioned, we have been using the PPI for many years, and we've gotten a lot of information from that because we collect it on a census basis. We've been able to segment all of our database, all of the results that we do on a sample basis by the poverty probability of our clients. And so we've been able to really make a lot of sense out of the data that we have without having benchmarks. So for example, we've been able to identify which segments of our portfolio are in the highest level of poverty. And that's allowed us to formulate different responses. For example, we found that our artisan clients and our agriculture sector clients were the ones who are living in the highest incidence of poverty. And so we formulated or we created programs that specifically responded to those markets and provided them connections to different buyers or helped them develop new technologies or businesses. That's one way that we've used our outcomes management. We have found that over time, it is important for us to complement our quantitative information with our qualitative, and that's why we do a mixed methods approach. We've learned that because of the poverty evaluation that we're doing, sometimes the information that we get from the PPI is not sufficient enough to make actionable decisions. When you're looking at probabilities and poverty itself being such an esoteric concept or a very high level concept, it's very difficult to understand when you see movements in poverty, the magnitude of those movements. And so what we've done is over time complemented the PPI with different indicators that we associate with at first we were calling it increased or moving out of poverty was our objective. And then it changed into reduced vulnerability. Today it's more around increased resilience, and that's kind of the learnings that we've had over time. And the things that we complement or the indicators that we've added to that area are around like savings, food security, access to health services. So things that talk more about a holistic kind of quality of life and precariousness of our clients and how we can help strengthen them within the context they live in. And so we've been evolving over time into understanding what poverty looks like and how to help it. We've also had to really tease apart what empowerment means to us and how we evaluate that. Again, that's another very high level concept. And we've done lots of activities around understanding that and becoming more precise with what we mean about it. When we've looked at business development, we've learned a lot about our client base. So hoping that clients, so we do the group lending methodology, basically the bottom of the pyramid kind of segment. We've learned that a lot of our clients are necessity-driven entrepreneurs and not so much, they really wanted to start a business and that's always been their dream. It's more that they wanted to bring in income to their families. And as such, they have a different profile and different kind of motivations than driven to business. And so we've been able to segment our clients and provide more appropriate services related to that, and understanding that business development is not necessarily an outcome that we can expect from all of our clients.
Wow, okay, that's very rich. Thank you so much, Caitlin. I'm gonna move to Scott, who I know has an equally long set of learnings. And I would say, Scott, some of what I found fascinating in our discussions is the piece of what's the best way to get data so we can analyze it usefully. Some of your really great insights are which questions should we be asking. Some of your insights are how do we go ask that, gather that data, who should be doing it and how long should it take. And so along that whole spectrum, I know it's a lot to think through, but what have you learned, sort of what wasn't working that you shifted? What would you say are your main evolutions in your approach, and why did you make those changes over the years?
Yeah, so I think just to be concise, maybe I'll focus on a couple of the tactical things that I think maybe other organizations can relate to, regardless of what they may be looking at. So one thing I think was the biggest mistake we made at the very beginning. We built our system from scratch. And so the biggest mistake I think is we paid insufficient attention to the issue of data quality. And this is a big unspoken issue that tends to make people uncomfortable because it really threatens the very premise of our mandate. But we spent a lot of time manually cleaning data sets, and it wasn't just not scalable in any way until we built an automated platform that helps us do that in real time. But I think paying insufficient attention to that issue really undermined our own ability to stand on the quality of our work and really have a strong, we want to influence. Our goal as researchers is to change the way people think and to help guide the organization. And if we can't stand with real confidence on the quality of our findings, then because we know the data quality is not good, then that just kind of calls into question why we're even here. So that was one thing I think we really needed to address early days, and taking advantage of technology, to do the data collection and to really assess the quality of the data, I think has been a big leap forward for us. Another thing I'll mention is that I think we've gotten a much better idea as to, what issues we should be addressing in research versus those that are really suitable for monitoring. You should monitor things that you expect to see change in a relevant time frame. And that's different from really testing, at a deep level, the hypothesis, the social thesis of your organization. And I think, it's tempting to kind of mix the two. And I think what we've gotten better at over the years is really segregating, okay, here's some top line indicators that don't need a lot of explanation, but they can be viewed alongside other operational data. And they might not go deep, but they tell us, who we're serving, how useful our services are, and some general conditions of the clients in terms of financial health. And we don't really push the monitoring system far beyond that, because really the point of monitoring is to give you visibility, not necessarily to do a lot of explanation. And so I think having that distinction has allowed us to really focus the monitoring on its role and the research on its own role. So we don't try to present things as explanations that really aren't. Another big change, I think, has been the convergence of business and mission logic in the way we approach our research and outcomes monitoring. So, there's always been a big overlap between the two, but I think a stronger focus in recent years on use cases and on usage has really aligned to the social and the commercial concerns of the organization in a way that's really fruitful for both sides. And it's very timely because the issues of uptake and usage are so relevant, especially as we're diving deeper into the digital space, because we know that adoption and the learning curve for customers for digital financial products are setting some very, hard limits on the impact pathways. And so I think a stronger focus on use cases and usage is going to really be relevant, especially as we go forward into a more digital way of doing business.
Great, and before I go to Corney, I would just say that really echoes, I think, some of SPTF's, my personal, as the head of the outcomes working group, lessons learned over the years too, and it's really become clear that difference between research and monitoring, and how the monitoring is such a different beast in terms of how it's done and what its purpose is. So I'm happy that you raised that. And with that, I'll go over to you, Corney. It's the same. You guys have, not to put words in Corney's mouth, you're allowed to answer this however you like, but one of the newer things that you've done is the early warning system that you've developed among clients. So you did not used to have that. I know for years you have been doing these call check-ins with a sample of clients to understand. But so you have sort of the rich experience also of years of doing this work and your newer projects as a result of some of what you've learned. So if you can speak to your lessons learned over the years, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, so I think sometimes, you get so embedded in the quantitative side of the data, and you believe that you can understand your customers. And as you grow and as they get more, sometimes it becomes more and more difficult to have that engagement. And at some point you ask yourself, how much value does it add? Things like that. And one of the more recent experiences that we had, which just kind of motivated why we need to do this more than ever actually, is after COVID, or sort of throughout the COVID period, we started realizing that what we're offering our clients and what they were taking up, that gap started increasing. And we were concerned initially, has the population changed significantly, and has there been a change in the type of businesses that survived, all of the strain from COVID? Or do people just not understand the product? Are we giving them something that's not valuable? And we did a big survey to be able to understand that. And one of the phenomenal things that we did realize was that our customers were self-regulating. They were deciding not to take more than they needed, albeit, they could probably take a bigger amount, they were self-regulating. And one of the things that we do with our customers is training. We help them to run their business, to build, and that's part of the touch process that we do as well. And then on the early warning side, what we do is as well is to have regular check-ins with the customers. And as Caitlin said, is to establish a bench, sort of a baseline, and then relative to that, to understand if they're experiencing more stress or less stress, and using that as an indicator to be able to build products that work better for them as individuals, not give them something that's going to cause more stress, but rather reduce the amount of stress that we put onto them. And then also for us, in some of these countries where we operate, we don't have the convenience of credit bureaus or things like that. So what we try and do with the early warning system is to see what across different sort of segments of our business. So what we would do is stratify that sample across different industries or sectors, different age groups, gender as well, and see what the effect of certain changes in the environment, macroeconomical, even weather, even seasonal, are to our customers, to understand, when do they experience stress, why do they experience stress, and how can we help or tailor the products to be able to suit them better. And that's the constant sort of, I would say, full circle evolution that we try and keep to be able to enhance, learn. And that's what we found is truly being super effective.
So this is leading me in two directions, but I'll do one and then the other, which is, the first is I'm a data person, and a lot of people on this call we could see are data people. And I think one of the questions is, what is the perfect set of indicators to use? What are the exact right questions to ask to get at the information that you need? And all three of you have talked a lot about usage, sort of why are you using this product? What are you using it for? And how that has become a key part of the monitoring, of understanding both from the business side and the social side what's going on. But do you have specific questions, either qualitative or quantitative, or specific indicators that you have found it most useful to ask or to track? And can you share those with our audience? And Courtney, we'll stay with you for this one.
I think it's difficult to just isolate it to one specific set of questions. I think what we've done over the last couple of years has been trial and error. You ask a set of questions with a preemptive idea of what you think is going to be the result, and it comes back and it's completely different to what you thought. That's happened numerous times with us. And you try and engage with either individuals who have experience within the industry to try and come up with better ways. We've learned that just asking it in a native language and not necessarily in English actually helps quite a lot. We've had surveys where we asked the same question but in two different languages, and the results were different. And those were the kinds of things. You get something that gets lost in translation. Unfortunately, it's a cliche, but it does really happen with what we've seen. So that was the one thing. And then obviously the channels that we use, timing that you use, things like that. But coming up with a fixed set of questions is one thing, and then determining the vehicle in order to sort of ask that also plays a big role. We would prefer a tech-driven type of solution to ask for younger sort of individuals versus older might prefer face-to-face. So those are all the things that we're learning through trial and error. We're still learning every single day.
And Caitlin, I'm going to go over to you and combine this question with the qualitative and quantitative, because you said the analysis of the quantitative, sometimes when you do a qualitative follow-up or a focus group, it helps you get a more nuanced understanding of what you're seeing in the data. So can you talk from this indicator perspective of what that means specifically? Do you have an example of something where you saw a quantitative trend and then you used a sort of a qualitative follow-up question to really understand what you were seeing in your data?
Sure. So responding to the first part, what's a set of indicators, I think that should largely be driven by your theory of change, what your mission is and what you feel like your organization is supposed to be impacting or affecting. And that should really be driving what you're evaluating. But that said, there are a few things that if you are in financial inclusion that you should probably, we feel we should be evaluating. And that's around, are you your customer satisfied? Are they using your products and services? That gives you a good immediate outcome. If you're, for one, doing any harm, you should always be looking into, you know, are you over indebting your clients, and really monitoring those aspects in financial resilience, or in financial inclusion, in my opinion, and also looking at exit data for the same reasons. In terms of follow-up with qualitative information, one example is we have a call center, and we do collect or do monitoring through the call center. And one of the surveys that we use is to see how our clients how much they're retaining of our educational services, of the topics that we provide every month, and how much they're applying those topics in their lives. And we've seen varying levels of retention and application over time. And we wanted to understand the why around that. And so we did focus grouping around it. And we really learned, and I think it's, you know, kind of obvious usually when you hear from your clients what they think. But when you have a chance to sit and listen to them about it, it's just more actionable. But we learned that, you know, there are some topics that are very high level or more structurally related, like women's rights. And when we talk about women's rights with our clients, you know, it's an interesting topic to them, but the retention rate and application rate of those sessions is lower than the sessions that are more related to savings, for example. And when we went in to talk with our clients about the why there, it's the applicability and relevance and immediate, you know, application that they had agency over doing something with that information. It was much more sticky for them, the subject matter, and they retained it therefore much better, and were able to apply it. And so we've tried to make our educational topics, you know, our expectations of retention and application relevant to the type of topic as a result.
Okay, great. And Scott, oh, Courtney, were you gonna say something?
No.
I'm sorry. Scott, I'll go over to you then. So you've given a lot of thought of not just what questions to ask, but how to ask them. But I wonder if there's some key questions that you found resonate the most in a survey that you guys always use.
Well, no, I don't think there's, I mean, it really, you know, because the areas of concern evolve over time. So, I mean, you know, you kind of, you know, we try to ask what seems pertinent in each year. I mean, in our standard year-to-year surveys, I think one area that's been very fruitful to dig into is financial health and understanding, you know, it's not one single question, but we have kind of a battery of questions around the topic of financial health to understand where specific vulnerabilities lie. And they tend to be very straightforward. So there's not a lot of, you know, a lot of difficulty or noise in the data. So I think that financial health has given us a lot of interesting insights into the different segments that we're reaching and some of the struggles that they're having. So, you know, if there's kind of one consistent theme, I would say that's one. You know, we also in the usage area, you know, it's a very simple question, you know, asking, you know, what other services people are using besides your own service. Like, what are the substitutes for your service? And, you know, how much are they using those substitutes? And, you know, how do they value them relative to what you're providing? And I think this is, you know, always gives us an idea to, you know, as to whether or not we're really reaching people who are excluded and vulnerable, and therefore, you know, we're bringing some added value, or whether we're just one more, you know, brand on the shelf, as it were. So I think, you know, kind of getting that understanding of what other services people are using and how they relatively value your services against the alternatives, whether it's in the informal market or in the formal market. I think those are two generally, you know, very useful areas that we always try to include.
Okay, I'm checking time and I can see we have about 5 minutes left before Q&A. So this is a reminder to our audience to get your questions in. I can see there are a few already. But I think I'll use the last 5 minutes on the question that we always get asked, which is the business case. And you guys have all already alluded to it, but one of the evolutions in how SPTF has talked about outcomes, and it's totally based on our member input, is we used to talk about, if poverty elimination is your goal, then measure the poverty level. And what we found was that there wasn't a business case for that. And that the business case is around what you guys have been discussing today, which is who's not doing as well, who is benefiting, which are the products that are working for them. And it really does, as you said, Scott, so I'll stay with you for the moment, straddle this line between this commercial information you need to know if your products are adapted or not, and the social information you need to know whether you're doing good. But I wonder if you can say more specifically how this monitoring that you do has, with maybe some specific examples, both informed sort of the business side of your decisions and also it helped you improve your social impact.
I think I'll mention two, and you're right, this is the question, right? We always get asked as researchers as how has your data been useful to the organization? And it's of course the question that we ask ourselves continually, as we structure our work. So I think one, I'll just give a couple of, a couple of examples. So one is, I think, and this goes to the comment I made earlier about measuring financial health and poverty as two separate phenomena. And I think we've gotten a lot of understanding that there's a big difference between poverty and financial health. And these two concepts, may seem to overlap or easily get interchanged. But using our global data set, for example, we found that the clients who were struggling most in certain areas of financial health were in fact less likely to be poor on an income basis. And we saw that age, for example, was a much more relevant factor for certain aspects of financial health. And so, it really kind of, it's not necessarily that we ran out and started changing all of our financial health, interventions to be focused on age, but that insight, it kind of creeps into decision making in so many different ways, and understanding that, okay, well, the goal of our financial, whether it's a financial literacy course or the way we're looking at resilience, the goal is not necessarily to reduce poverty, but it has a very specific focus on the way that people are managing their finances, and that is these are separate goals. And I think just having your program is going to be much more effective if you know what you're trying to aim for. So I think that was one kind of like meta insight that came out of our data, where I think we were really able to clarify what the institution was trying to do. Another relates to COVID, and I think this Corné mentioned this as well. We found early in the pandemic that people were really hesitant to take on more debt. And I think that was a really useful and a little bit counterintuitive insight at that moment, because there was a lot of concern and urgency around kind of getting people into, getting money into people's hands, on this belief that, that was kind of the pressing need. And, understanding that actually the customers were very hesitant to take on extra debt, that they were more worried about restructuring their existing obligations. And that really mitigated that rush to go out into the market with new products, and helped us keep our focus on the restructuring efforts, which, ultimately were much more, wide ranging and impactful than anything we would have done at that moment in terms of new product development. So sometimes it's helping you understand what not to do as much as it is telling you what to do.
And Courtney, I'll switch over to you. You did provide that interesting example of seeing sort of low usage during the pandemic and wondering if it was a product mismatch, not adapted to needs, and then understanding actually it was just caution from your client base, and not that the products weren't adapted to their needs. Do you have other, maybe one or two more examples of how you've had insights from data that were simultaneously relevant to some business decisions you made, but also relevant to client well-being? And you're on mute. You might take off the mute.
Sorry. So the one thing, obviously, if you look at the data the whole day, like I mentioned, you tend to sort of build models just on what the data is saying. If a customer doesn't repay on time, or if they repay late, you know, the data or the machine learning models might just see them as bad. But for us, it's important understanding that not all customers are, you know, it's not about bad. It's just, you know, they have a different period in their life. So they are more distressed and it takes longer to repay. And what we do is we have agents that interact with our clients the whole time. They help them, they consult with them. And one thing that we do is if somebody's experiencing some form of distress and cannot repay, we would classify them as a bad luck customer or a bad faith customer. And in that sense, we can enhance our models not to sort of judge everybody the same, and sort of see patterns in there as well in terms of bad luck and bad faith. And that we kind of help, you know, sort of to train the models as well, so that it's just not reliant on just the data, and that, you know, you have to supplement it with something else. Otherwise, it's going to be a very difficult decision to really make at the end of the day. So that was one of the areas I think we also identified, that having that information and having that touch element to our customers helps us to identify why they're experiencing distress. One of the things that we see is sometimes a customer likes paying every single week as they get the cash in. Suddenly on the next loan, they start paying every 2 weeks, or they might skip a week and pay a week. And you can, those types of changes in frequency could be as a result of changes in their business, changes of their clients, things like that. And we also incorporate those, because that would be early signs of distress as well.
Okay, great. And Caitlin, I'll switch to you, and I'll give you the extra challenge of not just answering what insights have you had that have this effect on sort of your business health and decisions within Friendship Bridge, but also client well-being, because you guys, in addition to tracking product usage and things like savings and business, you're also tracking things like empowerment. So even for those indicators related to your non-financial services, are you seeing a connection from the business case, or is the business case more focused on the data you get around the financial product and sort of financial behavior?
Yeah, so we try to use our data on a continual basis, and so we don't. I think the evolution of outcomes evaluation is that, you know, it's from the impact evaluation, we've evolved from there, where you don't do a baseline and then you follow up in 2 years and see how it worked. I think we've really moved toward, as an industry, more toward understanding insights along the way to be improving what you're doing. And importantly for us, you know, the goalposts are set up of our 3 social objectives of increased resilience, empowerment, and business development. And as a result, we're evaluating those different aspects and usage and all those things. And so we've seen, you know, the association between poverty, probability, and different aspects of our program. Like how long somebody has been with us, a client has been with us, we see a reduction in the probability of poverty. And that particularly happens within, you know, after the 4th cycle and beyond. There's a definite distinction there. And so what we've done is to develop programs that increase loyalty, particularly around, you know, the 1st through 4th cycle, to make sure that we are getting a good match with our clients in the selection process, and really working with them in the formulation of their groups to make sure that they are well formed, and it increases the likelihood that they'll renew their loans and then experience those outcomes. But what we've also seen, you know, using the PPI still as an example, is that actionable cycle, the getting the information, consolidating it, and analyzing it. You know, we get the information from the clients, it comes up to a high level in the organization, it filters down into decision making around design of our products and services, but it doesn't really come back to the field. And that's where we see major opportunity with aligning what our clients' motives are with what we want to do. And so we are actually currently transitioning to the poverty stoplight as our evaluation framework for evaluating quality of life in a more multidimensional poverty evaluation. And as part of that process, you know, we're going to be sitting with our clients, evaluating where they are, in a green state or a yellow state or a red state, ideal versus not really acceptable. But then they are asked to figure out which of those unacceptable indicators they want to work with. And then we will be aligning what we do with what they want to do. And we feel that that's a huge opportunity for us to make it more actionable and not just taking this outcomes evaluation framework from a very academic or an institutional kind of framework and including our clients in the process and really responding to what their needs are. And we see a huge opportunity there.
That's a great positive note to end on. We are going to get to Q&A now, but I'll ask our host, please, to bring back the presentation just so I can have the takeaway slide on the screen. And I'll start talking while that's coming up. I think the key messages that we have heard are what you see here: collect data that are actionable. What Caitlin was just mentioning about a continuous analysis and improvement, that you want to have a culture of data. Courtney mentioned that also is having electronic sort of quantitative, taking advantage of the technology and having data be part of your daily operations. Also very important to maintain channels of communication with clients for two equally important reasons. One is preventing sort of the negative outcomes. You can see early warning of distress. You can reveal barriers to access. And then also it promotes positive outcomes. It helps you identify what is working for clients and suggest opportunities, maybe business opportunities that you hadn't thought of, to fill needs that haven't been met yet. And this we didn't get into today. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but in our preparation interviews, it certainly came out that listening to clients shows that you care, not just about their their repayment and their viability as a financial client, but that about their well-being, and that can strengthen relationships. And that does tie to what Caitlin was just saying about switching to the poverty stoplight and bringing clients with you. You build this trust and loyalty and engagement that's good for both sides. Also, the importance of benchmarking, using sort of comparing how you're doing either to yourself or to your peers can be really quite powerful. And then that this is an effort that takes participation at all levels. So we didn't get into that as much, but I hope it's clear that you have your clients, you have your call center people, you have your agents, you have your strategy and your leadership, and it's really an all hands on deck kind of process. But with that, we can go to our Q&A. We have some really good ones. I'm going to start with one that Sophia sent in, and I'll read it out loud for the recording. So this one is for Scott. It says, you mentioned that you have different indicators for monitoring versus what you would use for more in-depth research. And she's wondering if you can explain specifically the types of indicators that might be monitoring versus the types of indicators that are research.
Sure. So I think the monitoring indicators tend to be more oriented around who are we serving. So tracking, the characteristics of the clients as they come into the organization. So, what is their baseline condition in terms of their financial health, and in terms of, we use the PPI as well. So, the monitoring data tends to be very focused around segmentation of the clients and understanding who we're reaching, and how, and then also looking at the usage of the services. Whereas on the research, we're trying to understand really what are the kinds of outcomes that are happening as a result of very specific product features and interventions. But the monitoring tends to be more at a population level, understanding who are we actually reaching and what are their needs and circumstances.
I want to just append, although I'm the moderator, but Scott told me something so fascinating to me in our preparation, which was FINCA was studying the effect of certain policy decisions during the pandemic about grace periods and restructuring and not issuing new loans for a while. And it was checking the effect on clients, sort of if clients ultimately were still with FINCA 4 months later when they restarted organization operations. I don't know about the 4 months, I'm making that up, but after a certain period of time, who was still back with FINCA and who maybe hadn't come. And they found that the point is that they found that the same set of policy decisions had a different effect on who their clients were several months later, you know, like who had sort of stayed and who had not. And it just reminded me of that sort of the unicorn idea of research is if you could just do this research product and identify the 7 things that you have to do to get this outcome is so unrealistic, because you could do those same things in 2 different countries and get 2 different outcomes. So that's the point of that anecdote. But I thought it was really interesting to sort of counteract this hope that if you can just figure out what works for these people, then you figured it out and you don't need to measure the outcomes anymore.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's go to, sorry, I'm not supposed to be espousing my own thoughts here. So let's go to the next question. It's from Bobby. It's for everyone, but maybe Courtney, I'll send it to you. She says, has anyone with all this data been able to use predictive analytics to anticipate which segments or cohorts will do well or not do well using data science techniques?
Yeah, definitely. I think our main goal is to use a lot of the models that we have to be able to determine who's going to be able to sort of repay or not repay at the end of the day, but also determine the level or the size of the loan or the type of product that won't do that. So what we do is we will predict, and then we will try and adjust the loan to kind of bring that down as much as possible. But what we also do is with the early warning system, we are supplementing that information to overlay on top of all these models that we are building to be able to identify deeper segments of people that might experience the stress, and, you know, to help prevent us cause that harm or early signs of stress. And the idea is obviously we do monitor what we expect is going to happen. So if we do expect by reducing the loan size that a customer would be able to afford or to repay that, we track those in real time so that we can see if they are expecting as they should, or if we should help them or intervene and try and work with them to be able to get that sort of. But we do that in real time, and we would then generate campaigns in the call center or wherever to be able to discuss that with our clients.
So Caitlin, I'm going to move this over, the same question over to you. I'm reminded how you said when you were using poverty data, you initially identified certain segments that were the most vulnerable, that maybe needed a different set of support or interventions or products to succeed. And I wonder if that relates to this question of trying to be predictive about anticipating which segments or cohorts will or will not do well. So can you explain a little more how you use data to cut off potential future bad outcomes and put the supports in place before it happens?
I think we have created profiles essentially of different clients and what their needs are, and created products and services that respond to them. Like I gave the examples of agriculture and artisan programs, but you know, I think we've used data to really, well, for example, the trying to retain our clients longer because we knew that the poverty level or probability would go down over time. We created lots of different loyalty programs as well to make our clients more likely to renew. Like our health services program has actually improved retention rate. It has something like a 20% percentage point improvement in retention rate in those branches where we have that service. And so we've basically tried to use the information to make strategic decisions around the development of our products and services, but also creating different profiles of our clients. But we generally try to stay away from creating barriers, I suppose, with those profiles. Like we won't exclude certain types of profiles based upon some of that data. We've decided that that's not part of what we want to do. There's not enough precision in outcome data to exclude individuals based upon that result. So that's a deliberate decision that we've made upon the data that we collect.
Okay, I think we are getting close to time, so I'm going to use this last minute. If we can advance through the PowerPoint quickly, I just want to show that there is an annex to this PowerPoint that where each of our presenters here has provided some more specific data about, so you can go down a few slides, just scroll through the annex, but you can see that they've shared questions that they've asked, information that they've gathered from the field that was interesting. So this is an overview of Friendship Ridge, but if you go one more, you'll see some data that Caitlin shared from studies they've done and learnings that they've had. And if just keep scrolling down as I'm talking, you can see a lot of data here in the annex that we didn't have time to show you our participants today, but you can certainly download this presentation to see from all 3 different organizations the kind of extra information that they've shared. And with that, just say a huge thank you to Corne, to Caitlin, to Scott for your expertise and your time. Thank you to e-MFP for hosting and to our audience for participating. I know I speak for all of us when I say this is a topic that we're passionate about, and we welcome your input and your participation. So if you have any further questions that didn't get answered today, please feel free to reach out and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.